that the gallery is now filling with more members of law enforcement, at least 2 other assistant district attorneys. Obviously, there is a lot of attention and people who want to be there to hear this verdict. This is a case that began on Tuesday, May 27th, the day after Memorial Day, or was it the 28th? I don't have my dates in front of me, but in any case, it was last Tuesday, the day after Memorial Day. I believe that was the 29th. And has lasted 7 full days of testimony and then wrapped up everything accelerated yesterday. The state wrapped up its case just after lunchtime. The defense called no witnesses, and they immediately went into closing arguments, and now it's in the jury's hands. I see Bill Miston is telling us that Anderson's father is not in court, and Anderson has not yet been brought into the courtroom. So, going to be waiting here for just a little bit. The jury got this case at about 4:40 yesterday afternoon, and actually it was a bit of surprise that the judge decided to send the jury into deliberations so late in the day when she had earlier said the intention was to probably wait until today, but she did that. She sent them into deliberations, which may well have been enough time for them to select a jury foreman and get set for today. They came right back in at 5 o'clock and called it for the day. She sent the jurors home and said to be back at 8:30 this morning. They were in place by 8:30, and by 9 o'clock we got the news that a verdict had been reached. We do not know what that verdict is. We will find out shortly, but as I said, if you are the prosecution right now, you're probably feeling pretty good that a verdict was reached quickly because the evidence was strong enough that at the very least one or more of these charges was likely to result in a guilty verdict. The question, I think, was most notably on the homicide count. If it was going to drag on, that might suggest there was some disagreement in there, but a quick verdict most likely favors the prosecution. Again, we don't know, and we will find that out in just a little bit. Bill Miston confirms that, yes, in fact, there is a verdict in this case. So it's just a matter of getting all the parties assembled and hearing. Now, if the verdict is guilty on one or more of these counts, then there will still be a sentencing phase. And that sentencing will likely be set at a later date, and almost certainly will be set at a later date. And of course, that will be the time when family members, community members will be given the opportunity to speak. I'm not sure how broad the judge will go in sort of allowing people to speak about this, but nonetheless, that is when the people who have been most directly affected by this tragic case will have their opportunity to have their say in court. That will not happen today. And again, the judge has already admonished the jury, do not have an outburst. It won't be tolerated, regardless of what the verdict is. She doesn't want applause. She doesn't want booing. She doesn't want any of that. Yesterday, when Ian Vance Curzan completed a fairly rousing closing argument, he was demonstrative. He was probably the most animated we've seen him throughout this trial. At the end of his closing, there was some quiet applause from members of the gallery. That is typically not something judges want to have happen, and she did bring that up this morning and said, that happened yesterday, don't do it again. So if you hear silence in the courtroom after a verdict is read, that is because the gallery has already been warned. You'll be sent out of the courtroom if you speak up or if you have an outburst. I'm reading that the DA and law enforcement do plan to speak in an organized news conference after this verdict, probably about 45 minutes to 1 hour after the verdict. It will be somewhere in the Milwaukee County Courthouse complex, not Courtroom 360 where this is taking place. So obviously we're going to be covering that for you as well on Fox 6 News. I'm here on the Wild Desk right now, the Wisconsin Live Desk. That's just a short name for it. I'm here giving you sort of updates, and you're probably seeing this if you're watching on YouTube right now, but fairly soon we're going to be transitioning over to our broadcast team, and I'm going to be a part of that coverage as well, but we will be covering this on Fox 6 News. So we're looking at a jury that deliberated for less than an hour. We know that. They got the case at 4:40 p.m. and they after 4:40 they this morning were in deliberations for less than 30 minutes, it seems like. So less than an hour, I think it's safe to say, to reach this verdict. What that means, again, I've given you my thoughts on that, my analysis. It doesn't mean I'm right, and we're only going to know once the jury comes out. I am told Anderson is coming into the courtroom now. I don't know that, I don't believe the jury is in. Okay, Anderson's parents are still not in court. Okay, the case is being called. We're
Maxwell
going to send you out there
Anderson,
right now.
case 24, CF 1692 appearances.
Ian Vance Curzan and Megan Newport appear for the state along with Detective Joanne Donner.
Max Anderson in person with Jason Finley and Anthony Cotton. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning, everybody. Is there anything to address before we bring the jury in?
No.
State, defense?
No, Your Honor.
Let's bring the jury in.
All right, so I'm going to take a moment for the jury to come in. They're going to see that clock shot because they want to be certain they don't accidentally get any shots of a juror walking in or out, and we're going to send you back over there to listen in for this verdict.
Yes, please. Let's recall it.
Calling State of Wisconsin versus Maxwell Anderson, case 24, CF 1692 appearances.
Ian Vance Curzan and Megan Newport appear for the state along with Detective Joanne Donner.
Good morning, Anthony Cotton and Jason Finley with Max Anderson. Good morning again.
And good morning to all of you. At this point, I have received verdicts. They are in a proper legal fashion. Who is my foreperson? May I have your name and number for the record?
Juror number 1, Marilyn Mustang.
And you did sign these 4 verdicts and date them today?
I did.
Thank you. I will now read them into the record. As to count 1, the verdict reads, we, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Anderson, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information. As to count 2, we, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Anderson, guilty of mutilating a corpse as charged in count 2 of the information. As to count 3, we, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Anderson, guilty of arson of property other than a building as charged in count 3 of the information. As to count 4, we, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Anderson, guilty of hiding a corpse as charged in count 4 of the information. At this point, I will poll the jury. What that means is as follows. I'm going to have the first juror stand in the back row on the far right. I'm going to ask you your juror number, and I'm going to ask you, well, stand and your juror number?
45.
Juror 45, were these and are these your verdicts? Yes. Thank you. Next juror. Juror 23, were these and are these your verdicts? Thank you.
Juror 29.
Juror 29, were these and are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Thank you. Juror 47, were these and are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Thank you. Juror 3, were these and are these your verdicts? Thank you. Juror 42, were these and are these your verdicts? Thank you. Front row.
Number 5.
Juror 5, were these and are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Number 1.
Juror 1, were these and are these your verdicts? Thank you.
Number 52.
Juror 52, were these and are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Juror 40.
Juror 40, were these and are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Juror number 21.
Juror 21, were these and are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Juror 36.
Juror 36, were these and are these your verdicts? Thank you. State, are you satisfied with the polling?
Yes.
Defense, are you satisfied with the polling?
Yes, Your Honor.
Then at this point in time, your service is complete. You are done for 4 years. At this point, you are free to talk to anyone you choose or speak to no one. It is completely in your discretion at this point in time. I will come back to the jury room and speak with you in about 2 minutes, okay? Thank you for your time and attention, and I'll be right back. Thank you. Motions.
State moves for judgments of conviction on counts 1 through 4, and I move the court to remand the defendant.
Move for judgment of acquittal on all 4 counts. And
When we heard it was a quick verdict, you knew where this was headed. But we got an idea yesterday during closing arguments. I think there were 3 key pieces of evidence in this case that probably led to this quick verdict. And we know that the defense had been raising throughout that there were holes in the case. We don't have Maxwell Anderson. We can't see him in the car.
Right.
You don't have his DNA on the door handle. There were questions about how can you prove it was him, but there were 3 pieces. One, I believe, was, and probably one of the most key pieces, was him walking away. The video from the MCTS bus of him walking away from the fire that was set to that car, intentionally set to Sade Robinson's car. What's he doing on the north side? How could he be in the wrong place at the wrong time the next morning? But this was really key. They followed him all the way to the MCTS bus, and he comes back home. And the prosecution pointed this out yesterday. I can't believe I hadn't noticed it until now. He's sitting on the bus. He never pulls out his cell phone. Who sits on a bus all the way from the north side to the south side and doesn't, in this day and age, pull out their phone and look at it? Why? Because he left his phone at home to cover for the crime. That's what the prosecution said, and I think that was a really key piece. The defense argument was that the phone had been left at home or was off at home because he was asleep. If he was asleep, what's he doing on the north side? Why did he suddenly show up on the north side before the phone wakes back up? The defense couldn't explain that, and they didn't try to explain it. The only theory the defense had was finally presented yesterday, and that theory was maybe somebody kidnapped her in the alley. Maybe it was a stalker, and they drove her all around the city. I don't know. Well, there was no evidence of a stalker. Right. There was nothing on her cell phone that anyone was texting her other than Maxwell Anderson. The other key piece, I think, here was obviously the couch photos. That placed her in the house. And by yesterday, the defense said, we don't argue she was there. Well, they had been arguing if she was there. Now they're saying we don't argue she was there. We just think she left and was okay. And finally, it was the secret beach. Maxwell Anderson had taken an ex-girlfriend. We learned that yesterday. He had taken her there 5 to 10 times to the very same location where Sade Robinson's leg was found. The guy he's on the date with the night before, her leg shows up on the place he called his secret beach. I think those are the things that made this just, that proved the case beyond a reasonable doubt. I think that's why we got such a quick verdict.
And the clothes seen in those photos as well were in the burning car found afterwards.
Absolutely.
As well.
That was another key piece, that the cable knit sweater, right. Because how do you know that's Sade Robinson on the couch? You can't see her face. Right. But she's wearing a very distinctive sweater. You can see the hair matches. And then how do you know that's Maxwell Anderson's couch? Well, there's that little light blue pillow in the corner, and there's the red worn material with the brown piece of furniture next to it, which matches everything we saw in that living room photo that the investigators got when they went and served their search.
Yeah, they called it that distinct couch, the investigators on the witness stand. We just got this in from the courtroom as well. The sentencing for Maxwell Anderson is coming August 15th. So found guilty on all 4 of the counts. August 15th will be the sentencing. Let's get back to Julius Kim, our legal analyst with Kim and Lavoie, a defense attorney but a former prosecutor as well. Julius, you just heard the counts read and kind of previewed. A short amount of time spent deliberating. I imagine no surprise from you hearing guilty on all counts.
No surprise at all. It was a pretty strong case for the state in the end. And I think Brian pointed out the main parts of why the state's case ended up being stronger than maybe we were wondering whether it was. And that was kind of these 3 pillars. The picture of Maxwell Anderson walking away from Sade Robinson's burning car. There has to be some kind of explanation put forth for that. The picture of Sade Robinson inside Maxwell Anderson's apartment in a compromising position. But I thought the third pillar was this girlfriend who came forward and talked about this secret beach. And those three things were the foundation of the state's case, and the rest of the evidence was just kind of filling in the gaps around it to solidify the case. And ultimately, the jury believed the state's case. And so, again, this was something where either you believed you did it or you didn't. And clearly, the jury made a quick conclusion here.
You've made closing arguments before. I'm curious, yesterday, I mean, leading up to this, you and I were talking, and you thought at times the state was having a really tough time with some of this, and the defense was really making some good points. As a defense attorney yourself, you were pointing some of those out to me where it looked like the state had some real holes. It felt like Ian Vance Krazan really had his mojo yesterday. He seemed confident. I don't know that if I sensed that Tony Cotton had that same confidence by the time it got there. How important are closing arguments in making that final impression on the jury? And do you think that Ian Vance Krazan nailed it down because his was so strong?
Yeah, I think that your perception is really right, and it matches what I saw too. The state, Ian Vance Krazan, I thought did a really, really great job of laying out all of the facts in this case. There was a lot of evidence in this case. There were over 400 exhibits, over 80 witnesses that were called, and that's a lot of information to assemble in a way that a jury can follow and to ultimately come to a conclusion that someone is guilty or not guilty. And what the state did very well is not only present the case very passionately in the closing arguments, but they also did it in a way where they utilized and leveraged technology. I thought that the timeline that the state put forward through the software program that they use with the maps and the corresponding images was great. It was really great utilization of technology and software to help juries get through the evidence in this particular case. Now, the flip side to that was the defense. And I did feel that the defense was a little flat yesterday, in all honesty. And I couldn't figure out why, because I think that Anthony Cotton is a good lawyer. I don't know if he was just tired. He felt deflated after the strength of the state's case. I'm not sure what was going on, but clearly there was a noticeable difference in just the energy that was being put forth during the closing arguments. And I think that definitely can make a difference.
I thought especially watching the counter that Ian Vance Krazan had to the defense closing argument was quite powerful as well. So emotional. Julius, we have a question for you in a moment, but we want to take you live inside the courthouse right now. We have a feed of some of the supporters of Sade Robinson in that notable color pink that has been worn at so many of the memorials and celebrations for her life, and this fight from her family and friends over the months inside of the courtroom. Just to get our viewers up to speed now, Maxwell Anderson guilty on all counts. We will take you live to our team of reporters, both outside and inside the courthouse, as they hear from people, as you're seeing some of the many notable witnesses.
Joanne Donner right there, who just passed by the camera last, was on the stand 6 times. She was the most frequently called witness in the case.
Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office detectives, one of the lead investigators for this case. We will bring you there live to the courthouse as we can to hear from the supporters of Sade Robinson once they are willing to speak. But Julius, let me get back to that last point you made about the defense. Was there anything that you thought they could have done? There's ultimately the decision not to call a single witness, not to have Maxwell Anderson testify in his own defense, which is his right and is common in criminal cases like this. But anything that you thought the defense could have done that they did not in this trial, or was the mountain just too steep when it came to the evidence on the state's side?
Well, again, in fairness to the defense team in this case, it's really easy as an attorney that's doing analysis to kind of play armchair quarterback to these situations. But of course, it's, by human nature, you're going to go and wonder if something else could have been done or maybe done differently. In this case, as we talked about off the record here, Brian, many times, is that this is a case where I felt the defense was making its defense through cross-examination of the state's witnesses. And that sometimes that's what you're left with as a defense team, because if the facts aren't there for you, sometimes what you have to do is try and poke holes in the state's case and the evidence that the state's providing. Now, I thought the state made some pretty good strategic decisions here. A phrase that myself and my law partner, Jonathan Lavoie, used often as we have provided analysis in this case is that the state was taking the wind out of the defense sails. The state was preemptively calling witnesses that the defense was likely going to call to try and support their side of things. And the state, because the state called those witnesses, the defense was kind of left without anyone to call at the end of the case. And And it may have looked weak to the jurors if the defense, after all of this testimony, after 2 weeks of trial right now, the defense stands up at the end of it all and says, we rest. We don't have any witnesses. So I think that the state did a good job of strategically trying to knock some of the defense ability to call witnesses and bolster their case.
I think
The other
going
thing I
in,
could say-
I'm sorry, Julius, continue.
Yeah, no, the other thing I would say though is these trials are organic also. So you talked about, whether there was any particular way that this case could have gone, a particular defense. Well, sometimes defenses or things emerge while trial is going on. Sometimes a witness says something that is suddenly favorable to you and you didn't expect them to testify that way. And those are things that you can utilize or leverage or point out during the closing argument, such as, the prosecution or the law enforcement not doing a thorough enough job investigating these things. Those are things that sometimes pop up that you don't necessarily anticipate or you can't anticipate.
You mentioned the state stealing the defense's thunder a bit strategically, and I think with Pete Warbington, the tenant downstairs, that was the case. We expected the tenant downstairs was going to be the defense's star witness, and yet the state called him pretty early in the case and got that testimony out of the way. Still, the testimony at the time seemed to be damning to the state's case. The guy downstairs didn't hear anything. He's a light sleeper. There was no screaming, no struggle, no power tools. Well, as the case goes on, we learn, first of all, she looks like she's passed out on the couch, so maybe you're not going to hear much of anything. And secondly, there were no power tools used. We ultimately hear testimony that it was a different method that may have involved knives and other things that maybe don't have quite so much noise. All I know is that seemed like it was going to be this really damning evidence, and in the end, Pete Warbington, it turned out not to be much of a factor at all.
Right, and the state, again, did a great job of basically neutralizing that particular witness. The state knew that they had this ace in the hole, so to speak, of the picture of Sade Robinson in the car. And so when you're strategizing and trying to plan of how to present your case, you know the strong parts of your case, and you, if you're doing your job, you should be anticipating the weaknesses of your case and what the defense may be pointing out. And I thought they played it well in terms of, you could tell during their direct examination of some of the officers that they were setting this moment up with the picture of Sade Robinson on the couch, because they repeatedly were pointing out the descriptions of that couch, what it looked like, what it was made of, what color it was, over and over and over again. And that's because they knew they had this ace in the hole a picture of Sade Robinson on a red couch. You don't see many of those around. And they knew in the end that even though the defense was alluding to the fact that the defendant might provide some good testimony on their behalf, they knew in the end they had this ace in the hole. There was not going to be any real question whether Sade Robinson was in that apartment that night or not.
For all that they did not have, right? All that the defense attorneys kept pointing out, you can't see Maxwell Anderson driving that car. You don't see him getting in or out. We still don't know exactly when or how Sade Robinson died. The fact that they had those pictures from inside of that room. Julius, thank you so much. You have been such a great gift to us, taking us through from both sides throughout the trial. We're going to try to check in with you a little bit later. But right now, we're going to turn our attention to Bill Miston, who has been in the courtroom each and every day of the Maxwell Anderson trial. Bill joins us now live from the hallway. Members of Sade Robinson's family, her friends, her supporters behind you there, Bill. Tell us about the moment when the guilty charges are read and what that was like inside the courtroom.
Yeah, there were nearly 50 people in the gallery, at least on the side where Robinson's family had been sitting throughout the trial. Many more others in the gallery, a lot of them law enforcement, other prosecutors in the gallery for when that verdict was read. And you could hear a sigh that went out in the gallery from Robinson's family and friends and supporters when that verdict was read just a few moments ago. To give you a recap, though, the jury spent roughly less than an hour deliberating between 2 days. The jury was sent back to begin deliberations at around 4:40 on Thursday afternoon. They broke shortly before 5 o'clock. They resumed deliberations this morning at around 8:30, and by 9 o'clock had reached a verdict. We're waiting on family members who had gone into the victim witness services after that verdict was read. Sheena Scarborough, Sade's mother, visibly emotional, as well as all of her family and friends as they are here in the hallway down the way from the courtroom where this trial had taken place over nearly 2 weeks now. We're anticipating a press conference later this morning at around 11 o'clock with the district attorney's office as well. We'll be sure to bring that to you when that happens. For now, reporting live at the courthouse, Bill Miston, Fox 6 News.
Bill, if you don't mind, just a quick point of clarification. I think I said earlier that, Maxwell Anderson's father was in the gallery. I believe I misspoke. misspoke. You said there was actually no representative, no member of Maxwell Anderson's family
Sorry, you
inside
cut out.
the gallery.
You cut out there, Carl. But yes, Maxwell Anderson's father, who has been here for nearly all aspects of this trial from the beginning, was not here in court today when that verdict was read.
Interesting. All right, we'll get back to Bill Misty in a little bit. Just to logistically get people up to speed, if you're just joining us now here on Fox 6 and our different streaming platforms, Maxwell Anderson guilty on all 4 counts that he faced: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, arson, and hiding a corpse. And he will be sentenced now August 15th. Bill mentioned it. We are expecting a press conference around 11 o'clock this morning with the district attorney that just won this case, as well as police officers and investigators that were a part of this as well.
You wonder, you may be asking why August 15th? That's so far down the road. Well, first of all, they're going to do a pre-sentence investigation. Most likely that's going to happen. That will inform what the ultimate verdict is. And of course, that'll also give family members, maybe those who live out of town, time to make plans to get here, to be here, to have a chance to speak at the court. That will be the family's first chance to actually speak up and tell Maxwell Anderson what's on their minds, to tell the court, to tell the public, but again, to tell the defendant what they think of all of this.
There were a couple outbursts, especially from Sade Robinson's mother at the end of week 1, as well as you could hear some of the clapping that Judge Crivello noted specifically at the end of the closing arguments from the prosecution yesterday. Brian, I want to ask you this, because you've kind of experienced this a little bit like the jurors did. You've been watching each and every minute of this testimony over the 8 days, 7 of them witness testimony of providing our coverage. What did you think of the ebbs and flow? Because I imagine you experienced this a bit like the jurors did. There were lulls where you're getting nitty-gritty detail about the car movements and the different data that they compiled.
It was
versus that final moment.
There were times where the case really dragged, and I think it was just a couple of days ago when it was at the end of the afternoon when they had spent a long time, the prosecution spent time showing that video in the dark from across the street in Maxwell Anderson's house, and you're just looking for little flickers of movement. Clip after clip, the lights are off. We started to hear that jurors were starting to yawn. One was closing his eyes. The judge even said she was a little concerned the jury was getting sleepy. And I was talking to our legal analyst, Julius Kim, and saying, I think the state's losing the jury right now. So you feel the case is dragging. But I think the state knew it had to get that evidence in. It had to get that evidence on the record, and strategically then wrapped the case up yesterday. It really accelerated.
Yeah.
Yesterday, we got the ex-girlfriend talking about the secret beach, and then we got the photo of her on the couch, and that was like, we might have had you lulled for a little while, but it seems like the state had the last punch ready to go and brought the energy back. And I think that was by design, was they knew what they were saving for the end. They wanted to go out on that note, and it seemed to be a powerful note that made an impact on the jury.
Trials in reality are very rarely, if never, like they are in TV and movies, right? This is kind of the nitty-gritty reality of what it takes to work your way through.
Just this morning, I was watching A Few Good Men. Yeah, that scene, you know, that's what everyone imagines. There's going to be a speech, and there's going to be a great confrontation between the attorney and the person on the stand. It rarely happens that way. Most of the testimony is very measured. It is very dry. It is to set a foundation and build a case, and you don't ever hear how all of that stuff connects until the end when each side gets to make their final argument. That's the story. It's like they've gathered all the breadcrumbs and they're finally making bread. It is, I don't know if you make bread out of breadcrumbs. That's a terrible analogy.
I was the only person during the pandemic that did not get into sourdough.
But you get the point that they're taking all of those pieces, and it can be mind-numbing at times. I don't know how many of you watched every minute of this testimony, and if you did, you're one of those true crime lovers, because otherwise it's not exciting.
Yeah.
But I do think that while there were lulls, I think the state kind of ramped things up at the end, and yesterday accelerated quickly. And I really thought Julius Kim made an interesting point. The state, or the defense, did make its case through cross-examination.
Right.
But by doing so, by the state calling all the witnesses the defense might want to call, it meant the defense had no one left to call. And if you're a juror and you go, they don't even have a case, it looks like they're just kind of hoping we find him not guilty. The defense did make a case. They just made it throughout the course. I think that was another strategy that worked well for the state.
Yeah, especially in closing arguments yesterday, Anthony Cotton for the defense seemed to harp on 3 different things. First of all, intent. Could you actually say this was an intentional homicide? The burden of proof as well, the fact that you don't have a visual evidence of Maxwell Anderson in some of those certain areas. And then beyond a reasonable doubt there, the argument of the wrong place, wrong time, whereas the prosecution kept saying, okay, how does this person, this one person, keep showing up at the wrong place, at the wrong time, over and over and over?
I thought Julius Kim made a really interesting point yesterday, too, because now that there's a conviction, he still has appeal rights, and he will likely appeal because most defendants end up appealing at some point. But on what will he appeal? Was there an error made? And yesterday there was, I think it was yesterday, it was either yesterday or the day before. They all blend together after a while. There was testimony about, and I think it was yesterday because the ex-girlfriend, it was yesterday morning, the ex-girlfriend was asked by the defense, was Maxwell Anderson ever violent with you? And she said, or was he ever physically abusive was the question. And she said no. And right after that, the state went to the judge, said, we want a sidebar. The judge sent the jury out of the room, and they had some back and forth where the state said, I think they've opened the door to us talking about the emotional abuse that he committed on her, and also that he'd been in a fight with her ex-boyfriend at a bar, and that he had at one time instructed her to beat herself up in the bathroom and then tell police the ex-boyfriend did it. The state was given license by the judge. Don't talk about the emotional abuse, but physical abuse they've opened the door to. So you can talk about the fight. You can talk about him telling her to beat herself up. The state mentioned the fight briefly. They never went to the other piece. And I thought, why would the judge said, go ahead. Why didn't you do it? You just fought for it. And Julius Kim said he thinks they were being conservative to protect the record, because if they went too far with something they had previously agreed they weren't going to talk about, that might open the door. And so Julius Kim said he really saw the state behaving in a way that experienced prosecutors do here, that a lesser experienced prosecutor might have taken that as license to go full bore and trash Maxwell Anderson's character. They didn't, and he thinks that was intentional to protect the record. So this isn't the end of the case. This is a big day for the victims, obviously, for the victim's family, but now there's sentencing and there's still appeal rights after that.
I think it's important to remember there's a victim at the center of this, right? Sade Robinson was a 19-year-old college student about a month away from getting her criminal justice degree, of all things, and she was the one whose life was ended in such ugly fashion more than a year ago. As we get you ready for the rest of our coverage here today, again, we're waiting to hear from Sade Robinson's family or supporters here. We heard that her mother was in court, as she has been for so much of the trial. She was with some of the victims' advocates there at the courthouse. We'll see if we hear from her directly. We are going to hear from the district attorney and police around 11 o'clock this morning as well. What else stood out to you, Brian, over the course? Listening to Jonathan Lavoie, who is Julius Kim's partner at their defense firm, one of the interesting things I thought, too, was perhaps a bit of a misstep from the defense yesterday when there was the questioning of the beach and how you could get here. And some of that, it seemed to really kind of turn things around as well.
I think certainly, as I said, I think it was one of the three key pieces that this witness, this ex-girlfriend, not only knew about this beach and said he called it a secret beach, she went along with an investigator and said, I don't know the streets of Milwaukee very well. I don't know them by name, but I can show you. And she took him on the path. And her path was very specific. As she got to the service road, you remember where the gate had been smashed by the car, by Sade Robinson's car. And prosecutors said that was Maxwell Anderson smashing the gate because there's a body in the car and he can't carry it all the way down. She said we would go that route. We'd squeeze through the fence. So he knew you could get through the fence without smashing the gate. She had gone through that gate, and they would walk down that very same service road and go to the very same beach, at the very same location where Sade Robinson's leg was found. I think that really opened a door for the prosecution to say, well, he knew how to get down there by walking. Then why would he have to smash the gate? Well, he smashed the gate because there's a body in the car. And so I did think that was really important. And it also raises the question, while the defense tried to say it's not that secret of a beach, other people go there, it's part of a public park.
It was
that
someone
may
else
be
who
true.
found Sade Robinson's severed leg on that beach.
That's true. And while that's true, you still have to explain how the woman he just went on a date with, who's the subject of this, her leg is found in the place the next day where you've taken previous romantic partners on a regular basis and called it your secret beach. I just thought that was that plus the photographs that we saw, and that all came yesterday. I think those were the final nails in the coffin of the defense case.
I believe we have Julius Kim back with us, our legal analyst, along with his partner, Jonathan Lavoie. Julius, since we're discussing it right now, kind of those key moments from yesterday, I think you heard some of this, but the discussion of the Hollywood moments that don't happen in real trials, right? There is not a smoking gun in this case. We still don't necessarily know much of the information about the final moments of Sade Robinson's life. How about those photographs, though, and the method it took to find them in terms of photos taken on Maxwell Anderson's phone, deleted, but they're able to recover and use those photos in court yesterday? What did you think about that as one of the final things we heard from the prosecution?
Yeah, I thought it was really, really powerful evidence. We were all kind of waiting for this picture or these pictures to show up, and we were guessing that the state was kind of waiting to the very end because they wanted to end strong. And clearly, that's a good move. But one thing I thought that state did very well yesterday was that they presented that very technical evidence in a very understandable way. As a trial lawyer, you're always nervous that as you're presenting technical evidence like DNA evidence or digital or forensic evidence, that the jurors might, it might go over the juror's head. But they called some good witnesses who clearly have experience testifying to explain things in a very matter-of-fact way and point out things that were really important. I thought the fact that the timing of when these pictures were deleted was very, very important. Saying that there were, I think, 37 pictures that were deleted shortly afterwards, and talking about how he would have to, choose which pictures he wanted to delete and then confirm that he wanted to delete those things. It just showed that there was a certain intent. And it also kind of made us all kind of visualize what was going on in his apartment during that time. And I thought it was interesting that they pointed out this picture, this screenshot or whatever of, what not to mix with bleach. That was just devastating to the defense. And the fact that that was deleted or modified around 11:30-ish on the night of the incident, that was also part of the story because the state was able to kind of show that what their theory was at that point. And that's what we wanted. We wanted them to show what their theory was, that she had been killed or murdered beforehand, presumably. Now he's looking for a way to clean it up, and now he's trying to fix things.
Julius, I look at this case and I think step back, look at how all criminal justice is changing, because there was so much digital evidence here. Surveillance videos from all over the city. There were cameras on county buses. I mean, what if that bus happened to not just be passing by at the time Maxwell Anderson's walking away from the fire? I think the serendipity of a county bus with 14 cameras on it just happens to be going by at the time this happens. You also have the cell phone data that's been deleted but is still there. And then on top of all of that, you have license plate reading cameras that are able to prove that the car they're trailing all around the city that looks like a Honda Civic around a certain era, it's definitely hers because here's the license plate. There were so many pieces of digital evidence. It seems to have changed what we can expect in criminal trials. Has it gone so far, though, now that juries expect you've got to have all of this? Like now somebody looks and goes, well, you don't have all the evidence. They had it for Maxwell Anderson. What about my case?
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge for trial lawyers moving forward and in this day and age. But you have what you have. And I think that, in all honesty, it's a lot harder to commit a crime these days with all of these things going on. Ted Perry and I were having a conversation the other night about the fact that there are video cameras everywhere now. It just seems like they're everywhere. So it's very, very difficult now for people to actually get away with things. That being said, I think that in the old days that, we didn't have all of this technology. We had to just rely on witness testimony and what people say, what they recall. But now things have gotten a little bit easier for the state and in some cases for the defense because we have actual images, we have pictures, we have video depicting what it is that in times past, witnesses would just have to describe for jurors in the jury box.
I thought it was certainly eye-opening. The digital forensics expert they had yesterday, just how much data is tracked on these devices we're all carrying, whether you think you got rid of it or not. It's there.
I mean, every little thing you do to that phone, or even when you're not holding the things that it's doing. And Julius, to that point, there was something I thought we talk about technology can help either way. It can help the state, it can help the defense sometimes. The defense was trying to use that window of time that Maxwell Anderson's phone was not interacting with the network at all. And that was from 10 or 12, what was it, 12:08 a.m. until about 9 a.m.
It was powered back on.
Their theory was the phone was off, the phone died, he's asleep. Of course he's asleep. But I think the thing that killed that theory was, then what's he doing up on the north side at 7:30 in the morning walking away from a burning car if he's asleep at home until 9 o'clock in the morning? So on the one hand, it almost seemed to help the defense, but for that other visual evidence.
Yeah, you're bringing up a good point. And again, I don't have all the facts, I don't have the reports, so I'm just, playing armchair quarterback here. But I did wonder if it would have behooved the defense to acknowledge that Maxwell Anderson at least knew something about what was going on, because there was, to not acknowledge that Maxwell Anderson knew something about what was going on, it makes it easier for the jurors to just paint with the broad brush and say, you know what, he did this. But if they could at least acknowledge that Maxwell Anderson knew what was going on, but that someone else may have actually been the actual culprits, someone else may have thrown the match in the car, someone else may have actually killed Shadi Robinson, someone else may have actually dismembered him, and Maxwell Anderson was around it or was asked